question for everyone. What did you get for your birthday? You may have gotten cards, messages from loved ones, maybe you had some cake. Well, for my 30th birthday, I got COVID. Like, thanks, universe. When I said I wanted to be at ICU for my birthday, I didn't mean the ICU. I got this present early last year after Valentine's Day. After I turned in the second draft of my thesis, I passed out at the library on this very campus and was then hospitalized. Actually, out of all the moments I had during grad school, I didn't learn the most when I was writing my thesis or even in class. Instead, it was at this very moment when I was laying in a hospital bed, wondering if I was going to die. It was when I was approaching the deadline of my life. My first night at the hospital, and even before that, I was more concerned about deadlines than anything else. When the EMTs kept asking me questions like my consciousness, I kept complaining about how I felt like I was running out of time. See, I had all these PhD applications due the next month, and I had no idea about what I even wanted to do after graduation. I wanted to heal as quickly as possible so I can go back and have routine mental breakdowns like the typical grad student. And like many people with near-death experiences, I thought about my friends and family first. As I waited for my COVID test results, I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, started writing out a will. Now, I didn't own any property, and I definitely did not have any kids yet, but I did have a pretty sweet iPad and an epic Sailor Moon collection that my siblings could fight over. After typing out the very long list of things I own, list of things I own, and the long list of things I want to say to the people I love, I looked at another note that I'd written many years ago. It's pinned at the very top. Things I want to do by 30. I wrote this list when I was 22 years old and on a plane to Japan in 2014. Here are the top things on my list. Japanese, travel all over the world, buy a house, find a partner, have kids. At 29, I only achieved the first two things, but I also achieved many other things that I never thought I'd actually do. And after what felt like an eternity, the doctors came back and told me that I had tested positive for COVID-19. Tried me the ultimate challenge, not doing any work at all. He said this to me: I know that you're a student right now and you have a lot on your plate, but if you want to prevent yourself from permanently having damaged organs and brain fog, you shouldn't do anything that's mentally or physically draining for 1 month, even if you feel a little better. Don't work out, don't write any papers, don't keep any deadlines for yourself. I was later taken on an all-expenses-paid trip to the oxygen facility and quarantine hotel, thanks to the Japanese government. My eyes weren't glued to the computer or a book, but I learned a lot more when I was far removed from a world of death. Instead of being fixated on the future with anxiety, when I would turn 30, or counting the days till graduation, I focused on the present of living to see the next day. So in case you didn't realize from the title, I actually made it to 30. I recovered from COVID-19 about 2 months later in April. I get all kinds of reactions when I tell people my age. You don't look 30. You still have time. At least you're not 40. And while that honestly does give me an ego boost and a sense of relief, it also reveals a more sinister underlying message. It makes everyone feel as if that progressing with life and experience is something to conceal, something to prevent from an inevitably happening to you. Here's a picture of myself at a time when I lived a life without deadlines. I think I was around 2 or 3 years old. When you're a child, there's understandably so much emphasis about how you develop and how you might turn out. But why is this positive image of growth rarely applied to adults? For me, adulthood was never associated with growth at all. It was associated with the superficiality of reaching a goal. Progress could only be celebrated when I fully bloomed with results. I understood the importance of giving people their flowers while they could still smell them, but not when it came to myself. And in my entire life, I felt like 30 was a deadline. There's Forbes 30 Under 30, a world-renowned annual list of 30 successful and accomplished people who seem to be at the peak of their career. This exclusive list was introduced in 2011, right before I turned 20. I had about 10 whole years to figure out how to get on that list, but I was just too busy figuring out what I even wanted to become in the first place. I felt like 30 was also a time when I'd finally have my life together, and I kind of do. Now, 11 months later, I'm out here doing a TED Talk. My 20s were also filled with deadlines when it came to articles. Name a publication and I've probably been on there. Al Jazeera, the New York Times, Japan Times, and more. And when I was in quarantine, I often thought about the past and how it affected my perception of time and the concept of living. Before recovering in isolation, I was quite goal-oriented, but I never thought these goals could shift in any way when it came to my age. And I've basically achieved everything I've ever wanted since I was a child, but I was especially a prodigy when it came to disappointing my immigrant parents. Most children of immigrants like myself are told to pursue fancy, prestigious careers like a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. Instead, I got a BA in English and followed a dream that lingered in the back of my mind since I was 12 years old. I joined the JET program, a 36-year-old cultural exchange program with a competitive application process. As I laid down with the antibody cocktail coursing through my veins, I was thinking about the time when I was giving deadlines as a teacher. From the age of 22 to 27, I was teaching English at a public high school in Hamamatsu, Shizuoka. It's a city famous for music, factories, and a thriving Brazilian-Japanese immigrant population. My experience in this town was a blueprint for my master's thesis, where I did research on minority students and the Japanese educational system. And when I was spending my early 20s in Hamamatsu, I learned the most from those I had taught. I taught my students who were between the ages of 15. They taught me that age was not the ultimate measurement of one's experience, how wise you are, or even a deadline. They were almost half the age that I am now, but they knew way more about alternative routes towards adulthood because they understood that adulthood was full of uncertainty, especially in a system that was never meant to serve you in the first place. If I mentioned the name of the school I worked at, locals in Hamamatsu would say that my students were stupid or rebels. Now, it is true that my students didn't follow the rules most of the time, but they were brilliant in a way that standardized tests failed to recognize. Some of my students went to university later in life. One of my students dropped out of school at 15 years old and became a YouTuber. And when he turned 18, he joined the same talent agency as Hikaki, Japan's #1 YouTuber. And the rest of my students, well, they were still figuring things out, and that was okay. I noticed that this disproportionately affected my minority students, as they would be more likely to drop out of high school and get left behind. This pushed me to design a more inclusive curriculum, and I showed this documentary called Hafu. I remember when I was 25 years old and sitting by my desk. I was watching TED Talks on YouTube, and I watched this one by Megumi Nishikura, the creator of Hafu. Her TED Talk gave me hope that maybe it wasn't too late to pursue a master's degree in my 20s. This totally changed the trajectory of my career, and I found out about the Rotary Peace Fellowship, a full-ride scholarship for people interested in human rights. Something we all feel strongly about, and yet is underfunded in universities like ours and in companies like Twitter. I just had to be masochistic and apply twice before I got accepted at the age of 28. And on paper, it appears that I made it to all the deadlines society had for me. successful at 30. But I learned that 30 is different for everyone. Everyone blooms in different seasons at a different pace. And that's what makes life and the universe so beautiful. And before the day I was hospitalized, I was more anxious about turning 30 for the longest time. You might have felt anxious too, maybe before turning 13 or 16, maybe 20. Nowadays, along with the midlife crisis, we have something called the quarter-life crisis. Your 20s are when you're supposed to party and experiment and discover yourself. There are viral TikToks going around telling us that we can only eat escargot in France once. But the only escargot I could afford in my 20s were from Japan's finest Italian fast food establishment, Saizeriya. And as my immune system slowly recovered with antibodies, I appreciated the journey over the destination. Those memes we see online about aging may be true, and they may even be realistic, but we can still look forward to turning any age as long as we stop projecting our goals onto them. For some people, adulthood is something secure, something familiar. Can you think of anyone in your life in their 30s who has impacted you in any way? 30 could be your favorite teacher. It could be your mother when she gave birth to you. America's favorite drag queen, Trixie Mattel. 30 could be your favorite K-pop star in the near future. So from BTS will turn 30 in March, Army. For some people, adulthood is a time of disappointment. You're no longer eligible for the work holiday visa or any scholarships. Maybe you're still paying off the student loans you had from your 20s. Maybe you're feeling the pressure of being single, or maybe you're trapped in an unhappy relationship. In your life, what's something that you felt like you had to achieve by the end of your 20s? Before I was hooked up to all these IV drips and oximeters, my fear of 30 was almost up there with the fear of catching COVID. And I think as I was growing up, 30 was something I was afraid of because the adults in my life were lost. When my mother was 30, I was 4 years old. Her body was a mural of bruises shielding over mine, as my father beat her with a chair in the dining room. When my father was 30, I wasn't even born yet. He was and still is addicted to gambling. And even if you had adults who you could rely on or trust, you can only feel the uncertainty that is 3 decades of existence on Earth. There's a sense of guilt that society likes to hover over you, convincing you that you're running out of time. You're often told that there's only a certain point in your life where you can make history, but as for me, I just didn't want history to repeat itself. And while some people want to become like those who conceive them, there's always something I feared for the longest time. I was born into adversity, so maybe it was something I could never really escape from. I also thought that my 30s could be either chaotic or just not happen. And during many times in my life, I never thought I would see 30. I never thought I would have a chance to bloom where I was planted. And on my 30th birthday last year, I got out of quarantine, but I wasn't fully recovered at all. I couldn't stand or talk for more than 30 minutes without losing my breath. I couldn't be taken seriously about my symptoms because I was only 30. But in the hospital, what difference did it make? Surviving many things in my life made me resilient in more ways than one. Resilience was an option, but it was never a choice for me. And that's when I realized in life and truly felt that there are no deadlines. My 30th birthday is long gone, but I am standing here in front of you today. Spoiler alert for those of you who haven't turned 30 yet, not that different. Just some back pain and gray hairs. Right now, we're all living in a strange era of uncertainty. There's a pandemic that's been changing the world almost every day. 30 isn't too late. Neither is 40 or 50 or even 100. And as human beings, our time on Earth cannot be reduced to numbers alone. All of us have something that we are concerned about because of time. So whether you're worried about turning in that paper you haven't even started yet, which is due at 11:59 p.m. tonight, or haven't figured out your career or how to pay the bill, I just want to tell you that you have time. You have time, and age is never really going to change that. You have time. Here. You're living, and you're resilient. Thank you.